guys, so I just wanted to go over and do a quick little lecture for 10 minutes or so on how to write some basic and simple answers to some common questions that will come up in your in the written assessments. So the first assessments that you'll come across in your nationally recognised qualification. So I've just got a little Word document open here, a little portion of it, and I'm just going to type out a quick question and give you some examples. We commonly find that if students haven't studied before, where they really struggle, or even students that do have quite a bit of experience with study, where they struggle is not so much the answer. We know they know the answer, and we know that because students call us and we talk to them, or an email, or they're in class, they come in and visit their trainers or whatever, and they can answer the question. We know that they can explain it to us in person. They can give us ideas. Quite often they have a really good understanding of the question, but they keep getting it wrong. And one of the reasons for that, or there's not enough detail, one of the reasons for that is that people often find it difficult to articulate, that is, to write down on paper what they're actually thinking in their head. So, and that comes down to professional writing skills, I guess you could say. And it is, regardless of how smart you are, regardless of how much intelligence you've got, none of that really matters when it comes to writing. Writing, despite the common belief that if you write novels or something, you're really smart. That's simply not true. Writing is all about practice. That's all it is. It is just practice. Okay, so one thing we do notice in these courses is that students do develop their writing skills quite considerably, and that will include you as well. So I'm just going to type out a quick question here and something of an answer, and that way you guys will have a fair idea of how to go about answering these types of questions. Now, this is only a recommended structure, so you don't have to do it this way, but it's what I would probably do for the most of the questions. It seems to work really well. It especially works well with some of the more tricky questions because you can divide the answer into two very different sections. Okay, so the question we're going to be doing is, what is a school? So I might just increase the size of that a little bit, just so that you can easily read it. So what is a school? Okay, now the structure that I want you to use, that I want you to practice, is to write a sentence or two broadly explaining what it is, and then underneath it, I want you to put some dot points with some explanations or some clarification. Okay, so for this particular one, I'm going to say a school is a place where people go to learn. Okay, so that's a simple explanation. It's broad. You can see that I haven't gone and copied that from anywhere. Okay, and I've started off with a broad answer. I haven't been specific. Okay, so then we might say something a bit. So this a bit more specific. Sorry. So this could include, for example, this could include adults or children. Generally, when people think of schools, they think of children attending primary or high schools. Something like that. Okay, so that's a very simple answer. Now you can see I've just expanded on it a little bit as well. So I haven't just had one simple sentence or something like that. So common questions that are very similar to this would be, what is duty of care? So, or what is OHS, or what is a hazard, or something like that. Now, that's your intro sentence. I want everyone to be able to do a simple intro sentence like that. So if you're watching this for a Cert 3, that would be okay. That would be a good solid answer, or at least the start of one for most questions, especially in the first half of your course. If you're doing the Cert 4, you'd need to go into a lot more depth than that. Okay, you need to go into much more depth than that, I would say, for the Cert 4. But there's some strategies we can use for that as well. Now, for all courses, schools may include, so for all courses, you'll want to do now some examples. Okay, so we'll do some examples and we'll just do some dot points here. So schools may include kindergarten, I can never spell that one right. Let's go childcare. Let's go high school. And let's go finally primary school. Okay, so that would be a reasonably good answer. So, and you can see how it's half a page. It's probably a little less than half a page because I've blown that right up to size 20, but it's taking up about half the page. And it's a good solid answer. It's well structured. It's got some clear examples. Even underneath that, we might even be a bit more specific. So right underneath that, let's make this a little bit smaller so we can fit I'm trying to film this so that the resolution doesn't change, so that you can easily view what I'm writing without it going all fuzzy. So underneath that, I might even have a more specific example. So for example, in the the largest school in Perth is, and I'm just making this up, Rainbow High School. It has 3,000 students. So you're just giving a little bit of an example, and students learn a range of subjects from English, maths, and science. Okay, as an example, so something simple there. I think that might have just gone out of the screen. We'll just make that about the right size. Is that about it? Maybe a bit bigger. Okay, so you can see how I've clearly given it. Now, with this particular question, I'd probably, so you've done one example, so we've spoken about high school there. I'd probably even do another example of a primary school. So your sentence might be, as another example, a primary school is, I don't know, as example, a primary school will generally have children between the age of, let's say 5 to be sure, to 12. Okay, so that might not be accurate there. I'd have to check that. Maybe 13, is it? I can't remember. So again, in that particular thing, you might even insert a picture, or you might insert a diagram, a couple of references underneath. So let's just pretend that we've got a bit more room here. So you might have underneath. The other thing you might even have is a definition. So we might have, according to the Department of Education and Training, let's say WA, and I'm just making this reference up, a school is a, little quotey things, place where children learn, I don't know, what would I say, skills, including academic and life skills, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, now, and let's just do a quick little reference. We got, I don't know, I'm just making this up. Schools. Department of, what is it? Department of Education and Training. .wa.gov.au. They usually have a thing on it, something like that. So, slash, let's pretend this came from that site. Okay, so I just made this up completely. Don't go to that, it doesn't exist. But you can see how we've just done a quick little definition there that we've taken from a relevant place. Now, if this question came up and you were doing a course like Education Support to get a job in WA, then that'd be a relevant sort of thing. But if you're in Melbourne doing this, or if you're doing if you're doing a business course, for example, you may go to the Chamber of Commerce and get a good answer there. Okay, so that could be another sort of way you could answer that course. You see how it's a very simple answer, and we've just structured it in a very different way. Okay, so now just another quick example. I'm going to get through these quite quick. So I want to, it's probably a bit too small there. I don't know if you can read that. What is a primary school and what is a high school? And how are they different? Now, this is a bit more of a tricky question, and this will apply for a lot of questions like this, because you can see how there's 3 different parts to that question, and that's what you really need to be able to work on. So this question, for starters, I would say a primary school is a public or private institution where students aged between, let's say, 5 and 12 go to learn between the days of Monday to Friday, 9 till 3 or something like that. So you could, I haven't really thought about this. You can expand on it. You'll obviously spend a bit of time brainstorming and figuring this out, find out what the actual definition is, and so on and so forth. You might put a few examples in there, a little picture underneath. Um, you might expand a bit and say something like, generally, students have a main teacher who is called the classroom teacher. Students learn topics such as literacy and numeracy, um, um, phys ed, phys ed. Let's go physical education. So it's physical education, music, and science. Okay, so that's the first part of the question. So you can see up there it says, what is a primary school? Now the second part says, what is a high school? Now with this primary school bit, you could have actually put some dot points. So a primary school and have a sentence or two, and then to say topics that students study is X, Y, Z, and had 3 or 4 dot points there. Then you would go on and do the high school bit. So now under here, we would write let's go a high school, however, is a learning institution um, where students between the age of, now you would just obviously fill that in, okay, so you can complete that now, and then you might have some examples of topics that they would finish. A high school education is the highest level of formal compulsory education in Australia. You might say something like that, okay, but obviously you would have done a bit of research here and you would have, so yeah, I've done 2 decent paragraphs. I mean, they look quite nice, they're quite well structured, and they just basically give, so at a Cert 3 level that would be fine, it gives you the basic sort of information. At a Cert 4 level, or even at your Cert 3 anyway, you'd still be trying to put in as much as possible in the way of a couple of examples. So um, in this case I might say an example, for example, Rainbow High School, blah 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 blah, caters for students in regional and remote areas for I don't know, K to 7. Once students have completed their education in year 7, they then move to the high school, to the district high school, or something like that. So you can see how you've got a little bit of an example. Maybe you put a couple of web references underneath that as well, and a picture of a primary school student or something, or I don't know, a clip art bit or something. So usually, I mean, I know we don't require pictures, but I always tell students something simple and little is always a good idea. Just make sure it's not a big file. In fact, for this particular question, I mean, it probably doesn't require a diagram or anything like that to explain it because it's such a simple, basic question. I'd probably just ignore that comment, pretend I didn't actually say it. Now, remember, there are 3 parts to this question. So if you want to pass this question, what is a primary school? So let's just highlight that. Yep, you've done that bit. So that bit goes there. Okay, the next bit is, what is a high school? Okay, so we've done that bit, and yes, we've done what is a high school, that bit goes there. And the final bit, and how are they different? So now this bit here, how are they different? We'll make that grey. There we go. Oh, what's going on here? Yeah, the colours are going all over the place. Great. Okay, so down here we'll say the difference between, what am I doing? A primary, actually let's just make a primary school and a high school is demonstrated in the table below. And I think when you're comparing something, it's usually just easy to have a table. Okay, that's usually the easiest way to do it, I would say. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. You could write some sentences, and if you wrote a few sentences there, that would be fine. You might be able to say something like a primary school is between this age, whereas a high school is between this age. A primary school has one general teacher, a high school has this. But it says, how are they different? So that would probably, I mean, I don't think your trainer would really care, but I'd be thinking, but they're not always different. So in some senses they're different, but in other senses they're very the same. Okay, so notice that I've stuck to the topic here. So I haven't really gone off kilter. I haven't gone off topic and started talking about private and public or universities or anything like that. So I've specifically stuck to the topic. Now this is a pretty good answer, right? So if you got that type of answer, it's very simple. It doesn't show that you're, a genius or an Einstein in this area, but it's just simple and it clearly answers the every part of the question, right? So maybe I would put a bit more information into each one of those. You can see I haven't tried to put in any tricky language or anything. It sounds simple, it sounds easy, it explains it well. no problems whatsoever. Okay, so just be aware, make sure you hit all different parts of the question if they come up. And remember that not all of them are this simple. So some of them will require, say, a lot more information. You might do 10 dot points or something like that for each question. Okay, now if you get a simple question, so your question might be, what is, I don't know, let's do, what is a power station? I'm just making this up. Now that's a more simple sort of question, right? But you'd still be trying to get, quite a few. Let's say we had 6 sentences. So you wouldn't actually write 6 sentences like that. I just did that for your sort of benefit. But I mean, I would probably say something like a power station is a large, generally industrial complex that generates power or transfers power so that homes and commercial properties can have electricity. Electricity is needed to power things like blah, blah, blah. So you'd make sure, because it's a simple question, there's only one part to that, but you'd still probably go into it in as much depth as you can without copying anything else. So remember, you're not just copying something from Wikipedia. You can see how I haven't even, this question I just made up then, I'm not looking anywhere for it. It's a pretty simple one. Most people will be able to do it, but it's very, and I probably would put a couple of quotes. So I might say, for example, the power station in Melbourne that does 40% of the population is this particular power station. It is on 30 acres of land and something or other, something or other. So I'm just giving more information to show that I understand what it is. You're giving some broader sort of examples, but you're also giving some specific information as well. So that's very important to really beef your answers out. Remember, the number one thing you're trying to do is, yes, answer the question, but also show that you understand to a certain level of complexity. Okay, and to think of it like this: if you went up to your average 10-year-old and said, "What's a power station?" and the answer they gave was, "Oh, it's a thing where they make electricity and so on so that we can have TV." Now, if you give an answer like that, obviously you're not going to pass because it doesn't show a level of understanding that would be required for a nationally recognised qualification. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Make sure you put in a lot of information without gossiping. You don't want to go on forever, but make sure you put in a decent amount of information. There are some sample answers in the admin pack for most courses that'll give you a good idea. But in general, a simple question like this at the Cert 3, if you aim for, say, 100 words, you'd be doing quite well, I would say. Okay, so I hope that has helped you, and good luck with your questions.